Adelante Gallery in Chelsea, New York, where we will be looking at the works of Rafael Ferran. This is his first solo show, and it's called Visions of the Romantic. With us is Rafael Ferran, and this is a very exciting time, your first solo exhibition.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm a painter. I've been painting for 40 years. I'm a graduate of Hunter College. I majored in fine arts. And I've been painting, having many group exhibitions, Kristal, since the 1980s. But this is my first solo art show. And this show, the Visions of the Romantic, also AKA Art versus the Venetian Reality, is about experience that I've had traveling in Venice. And all the artworks here recollect, or they in some way, my interpretations of my experience in that city. And it could be either in the color or the texture or the design, but it relates to that experience that I had.
And Rafael, you're a well-studied, well-versed artist. Could you give us a little bit of info on your background, where you studied art at?
I studied at Hunter College. I majored in painting and minored in photography. I had many well-respected artists that was my instructors back there, back then. And yes, it was formative years, but it took, once you graduate from the university, the college, and the art school, students tend to, they wander and they say, well, I have to find myself. So it took me a while to find my own original voice in my art. But the work that we have here are from the last 7 years. And this is a kind of a farewell that I'm this show represents also a farewell to work, because my work I do now is not like this. It's changed, as all artists have to. We evolve. But it's good work, and I have this exhibit, hopefully that these pieces will eventually find a home with some collector.
And these pieces are from your trip to Venice?
Well, they relate. Most of them are directly.
Venice, Italy, that's right. Romantic.
In Italy, it's renowned for its architecture, and there's a lot of religion, a lot of churches. If you're not aware, the city goes back, its history dates back to the Middle Ages, and they were conquered by the Moors, and then eventually the papacy took up place there, so there's a lot of churches, a lot of that influence, and they were a financial seat of power all through the Renaissance and up until the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, much like New York City is today. And it's still, they have Venice has their biennales. They've had it for over 100 years, and they're very common destination for artists and public alike. It's a tourist attraction, and it's still on the map. It's still on the itinerary, and everyone goes to visit it. The Grand Canal is probably what everyone knows about of Venice, and so this is my little attempt as in putting my stamp on the city, the influence that it had on my artwork.
Okay, well, now we're going to take a little walk around.
The first painting we have that I'm showing is called Inquiry, and it's actually began as a painting that I had found. It was already painted done in an art school, and I discovered it. It wasn't mine. It was just someone that discarded the painting. So I thought, let me take it and let me see if I could do some things with it. And I started painting. I started adding things, collage I did, paint, turning it every which way as an artist would do, backwards, upside down to get the right feel. And as I was doing that, I noticed it started to look like a landscape instead of a figure study. And I started working with that, and I started building on it, building a quarry, rock, hard edge, formations, textures. You would see there a lot of angles, and it kind of reminded me of certain landscape features I had seen in Italy, and even some of the climate and the skies. For instance, a lot of water and a lot of red. There's a lot of red in Italy, and I like red. That's a particular color that I like. And then I started adding things. Since I added a collage, I started adding gems and little feathers that another artist gave me to kind of embellish the painting. And as you can see, I have these little glistening pieces in here, and it just gives a little vibrancy to the painting. And that's pretty much what I thought as I was doing the process of working on it. Took me maybe a matter of a day to complete this. Most of the artwork here I'd like to complete within a day. Some take maybe a week, but this one pretty much within a day that I took to complete this. The second painting we have here is entitled Accoppiamento, and it is Italian for coupling. And it's an abstraction. It's done with acrylic on canvas, and it's abstract, as I paint predominantly in abstraction. And it's a very vibrant color, a lot of red that I have in there. There are some biomorphic forms in there, meaning forms suggesting biology, animal shapes. There's also a lot of horizontal and vertical, suggesting architecture. So it's a compilation, a distillation, I like to say, of Italy, the architecture. And the reason I chose, I think of coupling, is what is Italy without a reminder of couples? And it's an abstraction, yes, but it deals with, as I would like to say, like to think, amore. Maybe I should have entitled it Amore. But it's a very sexy painting, I like to think. And it's one I like very much. This is my other painting. It is entitled Altare, meaning altar. And it's one I did around the same time as I did Accoppiamento. And this one is more architecturally based, a lot of verticals and a lot of horizontals. The colors are different. Now it's more of a violet color palette with some yellows and greens. And as I was doing it, I like architecture. And this works, the reason I called it altar is because it reminded me of a lot of the altars and churches in and around Venice and around Italy. As you know, historically it's a very religion, and the Christianity is very predominant in Italy and especially in Venice. And the interiors had this kind of dark atmosphere, but very, very sublime. And that's what this painting pretty much was about. At least that's what I strove to convey in this work. This painting is entitled Terrazzo, and it is painted in acrylic paint on paper. And basically the technique is what normally people would refer to as a pointillist technique, whereas all the colors, areas are laid down in spots, round spots of color. And as you can see, there are thousands of spots, and it took a much longer time to do this piece. It's called terrazzo. Terrazzo is a particular type of tile. It's they call it Venetian tile, but what it basically is, it's tile, which is made from marble. But this, instead of dug out of a quarry, is made with marble pieces that have been grounded into small, tiny pieces and formulated with a composite of concrete and other additives to make a pourable marble floor. And they've done it to such an extent, crafted to such an extent in Italy. It's a very old technique. It goes back thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, Romans, they've used it. And now the Venetians, they've done it. They call it Venetian marble. Of course, the Venetians always want to be the first to claim everything as their own. But they have, and at the places that I was staying in, when I visited Venice, they had that particular floor, and it has that kind of quality where it's very speckled and in different colors. And you can actually, they use it on floors. You can make a very decorative abstract designs on walls, sometimes on ceilings, but mostly on walls and on floors. And you see it in places of churches, you can see it government institutions, and in people's homes. And it works well in Venice because Venice is a city that was built on a lagoon, and to just have marble floors wouldn't work because they cracked. So this was their solution, to have a pourable marble floor. And so using that as an inspiration, I designed my piece here using that, and I've broken it up into sections, very geometric sections that can suggest, some people think it's a window, others think it's maybe an interior architecture. There's a lot of light. People say they admire it because it's very brilliant, and the technique and the color lends itself to that. And so I'm very happy with this piece. It took a while. It was a lot of patience, almost meditative, because I had to work clearly, time consuming. But I'm very pleased with the results, and a lot of people have been impressed with it. Now, this piece is entitled Galleria, and as one can see, it's a lot of, it's architecturally based, and it's reminiscent of a street scene that I had seen in many in Venice that they call plazas, or compañeros, campos, and it's done from, it's actually it's a painting, it's acrylic on paper, and it's done from a photograph of a collage that I had done. And this was an enlarged version of that collage using a very complicated process called a photo montage. And once I had enlarged it to this size, then I started painting, and it made more additions. I added the colors and heightened the colors, like the blue. And basically it was constructed out of odds and ends of pieces of tickets and mementos and pictures that I had garnered from Venice and my trip in Italy. And I collaged them and created this amalgam, or this little mini city with a very complex space, a myriad of space, like labyrinth and interiors that come in and out, windows, but it's all done in an abstract way. And this is a style, as I said, I'm an abstract artist, but instead of a painting, now we're getting into a realm where another medium that I enjoy, which is collage. And this is the result of that, of my working on with collage and painting. So this is a combination of painting and collage. And I think it was very successful. People are very much intrigued with the space, and it does remind one of the space that you find in Venice, where you go in, you kind of get lost, but you find yourself back again in the same track, and again you wander and you get off a train of thought, and then it's like a train of thought that you find something and you get enhanced with that, and then you want to go and find yourself back on track, and then you get lost, but you never really do get lost. And well, this is my attempt at bringing together an experience of wandering through Venice, or anyone's experience. This piece behind me is entitled Tintoretto by the Sea, and it is basically a collage on paper, and it measures 25.5 inches by 40 inches, and it's my largest piece in the show. And it's by far one that I generally have an affection for. I did it actually in a studio of a very famous artist, well respected in the art world. Her name is Sonia Getchoff, and she gave me a lot of inputs and a lot of advice on how I should approach this piece. But I basically took her advice, but I went through it and in my own way, and this was the fruit of that endeavor. It took me roughly, I think I spent about 2 weeks on this piece, and what it represents is a section of a street, again in Venice, much like Galleria. Actually, it was also influenced by Galleria, the structure of it, but it's different. It's quite different. Maybe a different abstraction, and there was more materials, different colors, and a lot of textures in this one that Galleria didn't have. Again, it represents that maze-like quality that I found in the city, that labyrinth type experience of walking through, and the very long plazas, and that's what the architecture of the city, the arches, the windows, the rooftops are typical of that city. But the reason I chose the title Tintoretto was, for one, that was the painter Tintoretto, who in the 16th century did use Venice as a home base to paint his artworks, his paintings. He was a very famous painter in the High Renaissance, and he was commissioned by the church, and he painted a series of wonderful murals in a scuola there. And Venice is pretty much known as a city where Tintoretto came and painted. A lot of the flavor of Venice was influenced by that artist. And on a personal note, I took up a school there, Bottega di Tintoretto, where I collaborated with a master printer and the owner of the bodega, and it was the workplace and the home for those 20 years of Tintoretto. And it was in his studio that I worked at, and I collaborated with master printer on a group of etchings and woodcuts. They're not in the show, but I've exhibited them elsewhere. But that was actually one of the reasons why I went to Venice, was to collaborate on the suggestion of another artist who had spent time there, and that's why I went there, and this is a result of that. This is a piece entitled Bandiera, which is Italian for flags or banners, and it's a monotype, which is my one and only print that I have here in the show. It's an abstraction of a street in Venice with many colors, and basically what it is, it's a back alley, it's a back street, and there are homes there, and the banners, if you could see it on the upper portion of the print, they're actually clothes. They don't use dryers in Italy. They actually hang their clothes to dry. And they have washing machines, but for some reason they don't use dryers. They rather just hang them in the along clotheslines, much like we did. I remember doing that as a child in the backyard. And basically that's what I have here. It's an abstraction of that. And it's typical. You see that a lot in Venice, and even throughout Italy, and even in some of the towns in Spain. They do that a lot. I just thought it was a very attractive feature, and it's something that caught my eye. And I made this abstraction with the colors, the blue, the reds, which is my favorite color, the ochres, and it suggests the sky with a little bit of the water, although there wasn't water on the ground. But this is an abstraction, and you, as an abstraction, you have that liberty, the artist has that liberty, the license to just distort reality of what you see. And it's a vertically format, it's a vertical design format, comes to a pyramid, and there are poles, clothesline. Measures, it's not very large, it measures about 4.5 inches by 5. Another encaustic is called cornicella, and as we could see, it's I added and the structure. It's not a square. There's sections that I added of wood on top. It's paper on wood that's been sectioned off. There's a lot of color on it. I've actually included a lot of odds and ends, things I found, some hardware, paper. And it's called cornicella because it's an amalgam. It reminded someone of a cornea, so I used the word cornicella as an Italian variation of that. It's round, there's a lot of green, a lot of orange, which I found in Italy. It actually also represents a section and textures of walls, ancient walls that you find throughout the city. This is another encaustic painting. It's a small, measures 4 by 5 inches, and it's entitled Pilgrimage. And as a pilgrimage suggests, it's a tour, or a travel to something, possibly with religious connotations. And a lot of people, I made it as a pilgrimage to that city. And you could see there's a lot of textures, a lot of shapes, a lot of yellow, a lot of white, a lot of blue, which are colors that I like. The white reminds me of plastered walls, gessoed walls that I discovered in traveling throughout that city of Venice. And it's just an amalgam of visual stimuli that I've encountered while there. This piece behind me is entitled Cannareggio. Now, Cannareggio is one of the districts, one of 6 in the city of Venice. It's the place where I stayed. It's the oldest in Venice, and it's the area, the district that Tintoretto had his home base, and of course it's where the Bottega di Tintoretto is located. And it's off the beaten path. It's not far from the Grand Canal, and it's one that most tourists visit it because it is the oldest. Now this piece, it's mixed media, so there's paint, there's collage, there's string, and bits of material, maps and magazines, things that I've just found in my trip in Venice, and I put it into this piece. And I created, there's also fabric, which like a bandiere, There are these flags that are draped on the upper half of the piece, and there's architecture, and it's just a amalgam of an experience that I had in that city. There's a lot of yellow, another of my favorite colors, and there's a figure, figures prominently. It's in an opera that they have in Venice, which is a very favorite pastime there. The piece behind me is another encaustic painting entitled Piazza, and it measures 12 inches by 12 inches, and it represents a more literal than some of the other abstractions. This is the architecture of Venice, and as you can see, there's a picture there. It's of Christ, and who figures prominently, of course, in Venice. It's a Christian city, and it's divided in half, and it's just representative of an entrance into the realm of Christendom. And it has gold leaf on it, and which is traditionally used in encaustics. This is another encaustic that I've done, and it's entitled Pasticceri Veneziani. Basically what it means is a Venetian pastry. It was a shop that I went to, bought some pastries, and I've included some of the pieces of the wrappings of that shop into the piece, into this encaustic painting, and so therefore it is a part of collage. There are other elements of magazines and Italian newspapers that I put in here, and it's basically a very colorful piece, and it's one of my favorites, and I framed it in accord and embellished it with gold leaf.
And it's all the time we have for this show. We've been here with Rafael Ferran, and if anybody would like to get in touch with you,
You can contact me at my email address, art@rafaelferran.com.
And all this wonderful artwork. I hope everyone's enjoyed the show, and thanks for watching.